Hello, this is your brain on drugs, and this is the punk rock psychiatrist. So today, back to ADHD. On the last episode, if you'll remember, I did an introduction to the stimulants, which are the amphetamines and methylphenidates, and we're gonna go through some meds today. So, like I said, I like to go in chronological order, following chronological order by category and subclass as much as possible. And so the amphetamines came out first. We're going to talk about amphetamines first. And there are a few different categories of them. You've got dextroamphetamine, mixed amphetamine salts, lisdexamphetamine, and amphetamine base. And today, I think I'm probably going to do dextroamphetamine and mixed amphetamine salts. And next time, get to lisdexamphetamine and the amphetamine base medications. All right. So essentially, what we're going to do is we're just going to go through each med, and I'm going to try and point out how they're different, what their characteristics are, and give you kind of some tips and pointers on like when I would use this medication. Because, like as I talked about before, there are a lot of options, and so I'm going to give you my opinion on which ones to use when. All right. And before I get into those meds that I talked about today, I have to talk about methamphetamine. Okay, so this is actually Schedule 2 drug. I think I mentioned that last time. You can prescribe this. I've never heard of anyone prescribing it. I've never heard of anyone taking it. It is apparently available. So I think we should cover it. And this was actually like an original. This is where it all started. And this is the one this is the street drug, right? Methamphetamine. People get confused between methamphetamine and amphetamine. They kind of think they're the same thing. They're not. All right. So it was discovered in 1893. It was actually marketed under the brand name Pervitin in Germany to provide wakefulness. Currently Schedule 2, which means prescribable. That's the same schedule that all of our stimulants are actually under. So not just methamphetamine in there, and available for ADHD and as the brand name Desoxyn, but rarely prescribed. Has a pretty massive effect size of 1.8. I mean, that's higher than I typically hear of for the stimulants, which is like kind of in the zero point 0.8 to 1.2 range, but can go as high as 1.7, as we talked about before, if optimized. I'm not sure if this is actually more effective. It has more risk because this is the highly abusable version of amphetamines. Um, there is and even though it's called methamphetamine, it is dextromethamphetamine, the Desoxyn product. Um, I had actually read today that this is one of the few times where a drug is not following the naming conventions it's supposed to. So even though it is a dextro product, it's not labeled as such. There is a levo methamphetamine. It's much less potent, and it's actually available as an over-the-counter medication as a nasal decongestant, so kind of like a vapor inhaler. I even found a Walmart brand Equate levo, and they call it lev methamphetamine, and then amphetamine is spelled with an F. Lev metamphetamine. No H, no O, no PH. I'm not sure why that's okay. Um, I assume this is a real product. I have a photo of it. And it's like one of those things that you like screw the cap off and put it in your nose and then inhale. Um, yeah, I mean, remember, this is the original thing that these were used for. So this is like so way less potent that it actually can be sold as over the counter in the levo left-handed antimer form. All right, so people often wonder, like, really, what's the difference between methamphetamine and amphetamine? So methamphetamine is more potent. It crosses the blood-brain barrier more easily compared to amphetamine. So it just gets into the brain way easier, and it's just much more potent. Um, so usually when things are methylated, that often is an indication that they cross the blood-brain barrier pretty easily. Let's talk about it. So, Dizoxin, the branded product of methamphetamine, looks like this is from 1943. Another reason why I'm talking about it first. This is the OG. Okay. It's dosed 5 milligrams in the morning to a max of 10 milligrams twice a day. And as an abused form, right? Like, so let's kind of talk about, you're probably worried, like, why would I want to prescribe this when it could be abused? So when people are abusing methamphetamine, typically they're taking 2 grams per dose. So we're talking about a max a day here. There used to be a extended release product of this. It's not available anymore. I'm not sure why. Typically, the extended releases are actually less abusable. But when you're talking about abusing 2 grams a day, and this being 20 milligrams a day, that's 100 times more. So essentially, you give a patient the max 3 months supply of the medication, and they crush and snort the entire container that you gave them. That's about what somebody uses for a single dose when they abuse methamphetamine. All right. So maybe that makes you feel a little bit better about prescribing methamphetamine dizoxin. And it might be a little more effective. I don't know. I fancy myself pretty knowledgeable about ADHD medications, but I have really no experience or knowledge in the use of this medication. And so I would say don't use it. We've got other stuff that we know is like safer and works really well. I'm not sure when you would go to this one. Perhaps if you've tried everything and it didn't work, you could try this one. Like I said, it's like 100 times less potent than the abusable form. So it's probably okay. But like I said, no experience with this, so I can't like say for sure. This max dose of 20 milligrams BID is equivalent to about 50 milligrams of mixed amphetamine salts, otherwise known as Adderall. So this is another thing that you need to know about these medications are the equivalent doses, because when you're changing from one to another, or you're trying to consider, oh, this is about the dose that I'm looking for, what is it? And so I'm going to give you the equivalents to mixed amphetamine salts, otherwise known as Adderall, and methylphenidate, otherwise known as Ritalin or Concerta, so that you can kind of get an idea, right? So this max dose of 20 milligrams a day split twice is equivalent to 50 milligrams of mixed amphetamine salts. And 5 milligrams is equivalent to 20 milligrams of methylphenidate. So I guess the max dose of 20 would be equivalent to 80 milligrams of methylphenidate, which is the max dose. So that makes sense. Okay, so that's why the dose of this one sounds a little smaller, because it is more potent. All right, it is formulated as a tablet. It has which, now this is a general thing. Anything that is an immediate release, you can split, you can crush, you can chew, you can, like, if you can't swallow pills, you can do it that way. With the extended releases, some of them you can not have to swallow them. Sometimes you have to dump the contents out. You can't just chew the thing. And I'm going to talk to you about which is which. All right. So, but with the immediate releases like this one, perfectly fine. And that's something that's really important, because a lot of kids can't swallow pills. And I think I've told you before, I don't swallow pills because I don't know, a weakling. So this is one that you'd be okay with that sort of patient. The onset of action is 20 to 60 minutes. That's pretty standard for these medications. Time to peak 3 hours, duration 4 to 6 hours. That's pretty standard for a short-acting medication. It's approved for those 6 and up. That's something that's different for all these medications. Some of them are approved from 3 and up, though I would be extremely cautious in giving them to those under 6. Some of them are actually even older than that. So that'll be a detail that will be changing. Like I said, this is immediate release. The extended release is not available. and it is available as a generic. I will be giving you both the generic name and the branded name. I think it's important to know both. But and it gets a little confusing with these ADHD medications. So it's another reason, especially when we get into methylphenidate. There's a lot of methylphenidate products that their generic form is known as methylphenidate ER, but that covers like 10 branded products, and they're actually different. And so to me, that can be kind of confusing that they're all called methylphenidate ER, even though they're not the same kind of products that work the same way. I think that's a little bit confusing. And that's why we're going to make sure to note both of those things. So sometimes, like when you're ordering these meds in your system, it may say, methylphenidate ER equivalent to whatever, or, SR Ritalin or LA Ritalin, and so because SR Ritalin and LA Ritalin are not the same. That LA lasts longer, but their generic products are called the same thing. So it's I find that weird, and that's why it's important to know that. All right. So that's the one methylphenidate, uh, methamphetamine product that we have. We've got several dextroamphetamine products. We're going to talk about dextroamphetamine next. We're going to talk about dextroamphetamine. So that's just purely the right-handed dextro enantiomer, the one that affects dopamine much more than norepinephrine. In addition, the dextro also affects the TAR1 more than the levo. So that was another thing I talked about in the last episode, was the TAR1 effect of increasing these chemicals, and the dextro has more effect there too. So dextro is stronger. So what is it approved for? In adults, only the patch is approved for ADHD. So if you're wanting to give dextro to adults and have an FDA approved reason for it, the patch is your only option. However, all the other forms of dextro you can use for narcolepsy. Um, to me, this is kind of strange, but it's something that you need to know. This is a big difference. So it's only the patch form for adults 18 and over. For children, this is approved for ADHD, narcolepsy, and obesity secondary to hypothalamic pituitary dysfunction. Honestly, I'm not really sure what that is. That's not like a disorder. That's not the name of a disorder that I am familiar with. So the obesity secondary to hypothalamic pituitary dysfunction, I'm not sure if that's like a common cause of obesity or like a super rare one, but it is something for kids that doesn't exist for adults. Now let's talk about the black box warning. These used to be different. Now I'm gonna mention it when I mention each different class of stimulant, but I'm gonna go over the details just on this one because now they're the same for all stimulants. It used to not be that. There used to be different warnings on the amphetamine products versus the methylphenidate products. That's no longer the case. So let's go through the history of this. In 2005, that's when we first got the black box warning. This is the highest warning that the FDA can place on a medication. And the warning stated that misuse may cause sudden death and serious cardiovascular events. All right. In 2018, this was updated. They added methylphenidate. So now, up to this point, methylphenidate did not have the black box warning. They add this black box warning and expanded and to say that the cardiovascular risk includes those with heart conditions at usual doses. So if you already have heart conditions and you're taking usual doses, you should be concerned about the cardiovascular risk. However, for most people, if they're not abusing it, we probably don't have to worry about this so much, right? So its misuse may cause sudden death and serious cardiovascular events, right? But in those with heart conditions, now we're saying, okay, those with heart conditions, even it not misusing it could cause it. And also we want to mention methylphenidate. That happened in 2018. Then in 2023, this was changed, and they just talk about abuse, misuse, addiction, and overdose. So in the previous warnings, they mentioned misuse, but not abuse. So misuse is just taking the medication not as prescribed. Oftentimes, this is an accident, like, oh, I didn't take it every day, or I took two today, and because I was making up for one the day before. Misuse is just kind of like not following the directions, but like not trying to get high off of it or whatever, right? Abuse is more like, um, I'm not prescribed the drug. I got it out of somebody, somebody gave it to me. I stole it from somebody's cabinet. I'm taking more than it's prescribed. So abuse is different than misuse. Misuse is kind of like an accident, and abuse is kind of like I'm trying to do something here. I'm trying to get an effect that I wasn't supposed to get. And then addiction was mentioned, which wasn't mentioned before. And then overdose is mentioned specifically. However, what I thought was interesting is they left the cardiovascular risk statement off. That was removed. That used to. So when I said it was added for methylphenidate, methylphenidate had a black box warning before, but it wasn't mentioned about the cardiovascular risk. Um, Adderall, as far as I remember, the amphetamines had two warnings. My memory was we had this misuse warning and we had this cardiovascular risk warning, and on methylphenidate we only had the one warning. But when I look now, there's just one warning: abuse, misuse, addiction, and overdose. They've removed the cardiovascular risk, and I couldn't find any explanation for this. We're going to talk about cardiovascular risk of these drugs after we talk about the drugs. We're going to talk about all the potential side effects. And we're going to talk about how a lot of the risks that people think, like the abuse and the cardiovascular risk and the growth, are not as serious as people actually think. But we'll get into those details later. But I just wanted to kind of let you know the history of those black box warnings so that you would be like, hey, wasn't cardiovascular risk in there? It was. Not in there anymore. Not sure why. All right. First on our list, this was the first one to kind of come out, approved for ADHD in 1975, was dextroamphetamine sulfate, brand name Dexedrine, also known as dextrostat. All right. I have a little tombstone on my slides for this one because this is no longer available. All right. Cannot get Dexedrine. You can get Dexedrine Spancels. That's different. That's the long-acting product. We're going to talk about that later. This is the short-acting Dexedrine. There are drugs that are equivalent to this that are no longer Dexedrine. We'll talk about those later. But Dexedrine, Dextrostat, gone. I bring this up because all of our dextroamphetamine products are based off of this original 1975 product. All right, so it was dosed 3 to 5, 2.5 milligrams in the morning to 20 milligrams twice a day. For those 5 to 16, that's probably 17, 5 milligrams. So you start at a little bit higher dose, same max of 20 BID. The dose equivalent is 7.5 milligrams, equivalent to 20 milligrams of methylphenidate. So that's a little bit different. These are going to be different for all of them. The max dose of 20 BID is equivalent to 53 milligrams of mixed amphetamine salts. So you may be wondering, but that's only 40 milligrams. Why is it, right? Because this is the dextro pure. All right, this is just dextro, whereas mixed amphetamine salts, our Adderall, our most common meds are considered an Adderall, right? Adderall XR, Concerta, those are the most common ones. Those in Vyvanse. Those three are pretty much all I prescribe. But we're going to talk about them all because they're out there and you should know, like, when and Adderall IR, I would say short acting methylphenidate, those are the other ones. So I would say those five: long acting and short acting methylphenidate, long acting and short acting mixed amphetamine salts, and lisdexamphetamine. Those are your bread and butter. Okay. But there are other products. I mean, I think the dexmethylphenidate is another one that, like, you could definitely be using. And we'll talk about this. I don't use it because I don't treat kids, and I don't know. I just don't see much need for it in adults, but like could be used. All right. Maybe I don't treat enough. And maybe it's not available in my pharmacy. I'm not even sure. So anyway, because this is the pure Dex, the mixed amphetamine salts is a 75% Dex at 25 Levo. The equivalent is max is 53 milligrams. All right. So if you're wanting to dose higher than that, this product would not have worked out for you. It was a tablet, 20 to 60 minutes onset of action, 3 hours to peak, 4 to 6 hours duration. You can split it. It's a short acting product. This was only approved for kids 3 to 17, as young as 3 on this one. an immediate release product, and it's discontinued. Another reason I want to mention this product is because I want to talk a little bit about some more history that I learned on top of the history I told you about before. I learned about three more products that I had never heard of before that kind of blew my mind. All right. So let's talk about Dexamil. That was the branded product. It was a mixture. Now remember we talked about I think we talked about Obitrol. Have we talked about Obitrol yet? It was a mixture of methamphetamine and amphetamine. It was used for weight loss, and it was taken off the market because of the meth part, right? And then the amphetamine came back, rebranded as Adderall. I think I mentioned that, and I'm going to mention it in the obesity one too when I talk about obesity meds, because that's what it was used for. All right, so Dexamil was a Dexedrine and barbiturate product. So it contained an upper and a downer in the same pill. I'm not really sure what the heck was going on with this. When you start to see stuff like this, you start to understand why psychiatry got a bad name. Like, we were doing some shady stuff back in the 60s and the 70s. Shady stuff. Uppers and downers in the same pill. Like, you see this now where, like, maybe it takes an upper in the morning and a downer at night, but to take it in the same pill seems kind of weird to me. Apparently, the barbiturate was supposed to take the edge off of the stimulant to like counteract its side effects. Oh, I'm like, doesn't it kind of negate it a little bit? And I found all these old ads for it. There were advertisements to use it for. It was mostly used for depression, anxiety, weight loss, and in specific populations that they actually marketed this to were pregnant patients, postpartum patients, difficult people, which is like senile Alzheimer's patients probably, and also it just meant anyone who's difficult. For the and these ads are so funny. For the irritable and difficult patient, give them Dexamil. But this stuff was like abused a lot. I mean, it has some barbiturate in it, which is like we don't really use those much anymore, especially for like at home use. So I thought that was interesting. That contained Dexedrine. All right. And then you had Esketrol. This is another one I never heard of, which was a mixture of Dexedrine and Compazine, the antipsychotic. Um, Another weird combo. And then there was another one called Preludin, which was phenmetrazine. We're going to talk about diphenmetrazine, which is still available. I think it's an NDRI. Um, I'd never heard of this until I started researching weight loss drugs. I don't know who uses diphenmetrazine, but phenmetrazine was like a more abusable substance. And apparently, the baseball team, the Reading Phillies, I guess that was a long time ago, but like I don't know. It mentioned Pete Rose. I thought he always played for the Cincinnati Reds, but it mentioned Pete Rose. It mentioned Steve Carlton. Those were a couple of baseball players that I knew. I didn't like. There was another one. I think Luzinski or something like that. Anyway, that like the doctor on this team like gave these baseball players Dexamil, Esketrol, Preludin, and Dexedrine, and he got in trouble for it. And it's like, what was it? I mean, I guess trying to make them less nervous so they'll play better. I don't know what the heck was going on there. Shady stuff going on in the 60s and the 70s. Oh my gosh. And I'm sure in 50 years, they're going to talk about the shady stuff we're doing now. I'm talking about the shady stuff we're doing now. It's not as shady as the stuff we were doing 50 years ago, though. At least we're making some improvements. So that's Dexedrine. Pretty interesting history there. Next Med, it came out the next year, 1976, was Dexedrine Spansul. I used to think this was Spaniel when I first learned it, but it's Spansul. Spansul. And I'm like, what the heck is a Spansul? So I looked it up. Apparently, a Spansul is a sustained release capsule. So I guess that it's like spans longer. So it's sustained release, like spans longer. And the ool is because it's a capsule. The generic name for this product is dextroamphetamine sulfate ER, is still available. It's dosed 5 milligrams in the morning to a max of 20 milligrams twice a day, which is the same as our other product. You don't necessarily have to dose this one twice a day since it's an extended release product. Off label, you can go up to 30 twice a day. Same equivalents, 7.5 milligrams to 20 of methylphenidate, 53 milligrams. The 40 is equal to 53 milligrams of mixed amphetamine salts. This is a capsule, same onset of action, 20 to 60 minutes. Time to peak 8 hours, duration 8 hours. I don't really understand how time to peak is 8 hours and duration of action is 8 hours. Um, I've got I've got these like charts that show like the curves of like, and I'm going to talk about the curves. I've got a curve for this one. Its peak doesn't look like it's at 8 hours, but officially that's what its document says. Can you split it? No, but you can sprinkle it. Don't crush or chew it, but you can open it up and sprinkle it um, into liquids on puddings or yogurts or whatever. Sprinkle it. Sprinkle it in your mouth directly. It doesn't matter. You can sprinkle it in there and wash it down with water. Whatever, would kids sneak it into their food? Sprinkle it on there. This is for 6 to 17 years old. Eight, as I mentioned, adults, narcolepsy only. This is an extended release stimulant. So all extended release stimulants had a warning update this year. I talked about this in my updates episode, the last one I did. I need to do another one. I just haven't had any time. Been busy. So there was an update this year, 2025, regarding weight loss in children under the age of 6. And you can listen to that episode for more details, but I kind of thought like, yeah, it's not even approved for that age group. So why are we that concerned? I guess if it's being used off label, they're like, hey, and also, duh, we know this. We know it can cause weight loss in children. And I mean, yeah, not just under 6, but there's like a specific warning now. I guess a bunch of kids under 6 must have been getting this, losing weight, and like parents were pissed off that they didn't know that this was a problem. But I mean, we've known this. This is something you should be talking to them about. And it applies to all extended release stimulants, okay? Not just this one. So I don't think I'm mentioning it on all of them, but just note this applies to all of them. This warning that I could care less about because I don't give meds to kids 3 to 5 years old and would probably not want to give them this kind of medication. And if I did, I would be watching them very carefully, including their weight. All right, so the capsule contains an immediate and a delayed release beads. So this is kind of a theme. We're going to talk about all these products have different technologies, and I'll tell you what those technologies are. In this one, essentially, the capsule contains the regular Dexedrine. So I said the Dexedrine is not for sale anymore, but there's some Dexedrine inside Dexedrine spancels. So there's actual like immediate release Dexedrine in there. And then you've got delayed release beads. So those are like basically beads that have a coating on them that take longer to get released. So when you take the medication, it's like half of it is like you took half a dose of the immediate release, and then the rest of them get released later. Sometimes and depending on the product, those might get released slowly or all at the same time. So some of them might be equivalent to taking like a dose of IR and then a dose of IR later. And some of them might be equivalent to taking a dose of IR and then like kind of a dose of IR that gets like released slowly. So all the products are kind of different in that. And it's hard to know how they're going to like react in different patients. So is this generic? Heck yeah, it is. 1976. It is generic. So I love me some generic products because they are cheap. All right, so I've got a chart here that compares Dexedrine spancels with crushed Dexedrine spancels. I don't have any other charts that have crushed in there. That's like if you're abusing it. So like you're crushing the beads open. So basically like you're trying to get like basically turn it into all IR, or snort it or shoot it or get it in that form. But remember, these are beads. I would not be shooting or snorting like the little capsule bead pieces. You'd have to be pretty careful. I wouldn't want that stuff getting into those parts of my body, the little bead polymer pieces. Um, but if you wanted to get all that effect as IR at once, because you're abusing the medication, not because I'm saying you should, you could the crush them. It's not going to work quite as fast as if it were IR. It's still going to be slowed down. And then I've got a comparison to lisdexamphetamine, which is Vyvanse. And so when the crushed one, basically it shows that it peaks way faster and way higher and then wears off quicker. Makes sense. And then the dextrogen spancels, you see like kind of the two peaks. Like there's one peak at like 30 minutes, and then the next peak, interestingly, is at like an hour. So like I guess those delayed release beads. And then there's almost like another kind of little peak at 3. Like it looks like at 1.5 hours it goes down a little bit, and then it kind of pops up again. So it's not that smooth. And when you look at the lisdexamphetamine, it's just like it takes 1 to 1.5 hours to kind of get up to like a level that's going to be effective. But then it's just like a very smooth curve. So um, this is not as smooth as like a lisdexamphetamine. And if you want to see the difference, you can see the chart here. You can see it in my slides, or you can look it up yourself. All right. Our next dextroamphetamine product, which is also called dextroamphetamine sulfate. This is why they're confusing. They all have the same name. This is Procentra. This is a newer product, came out in 2009. It's got the same dosing, the same equivalents, same onsets. Everything is the same on this one. The only difference between Procentra and Dexedrine is one, this is an immediate release product. So this is more similar to this would be like equivalent to the Dexedrine that is no longer available, the short acting Dexedrine. Okay. And it's a liquid. All right. So if you're looking for a short acting dextroamphetamine and you want a liquid product, I don't know why you would. If you can crush pills, this is your guy, Procentra, and it's generic. Everything else is the same. This is like all the same information as for Dexedrine. I don't need to repeat it. All you need to know is that this is a liquid version. And then our next product, another dextroamphetamine sulfate ER, branded name is Zenzedi. This one came out in 2013. What do you need to know about this? Well, it's exactly the same as Dexedrine again. So Dexedrine, Procentra, Zenzedi are all the same thing. Dexedrine's not available. So so you can't get that one. If you want to get the old Dexedrine, you have to go with Procentra or Zenzedi, the short acting, right? Because we have the spancels, which are the long acting. What's the difference between Zenzedi and Procentra? Well, Procentra is liquid. This is a tablet. But can this be crushed or chewed or split? Yes, it can. All right. So if for whatever reason the patient can't take a crushed pill, give them the liquid. That would be the point of Procentra. And the good news is that Procentra is generic, so it's going to be cheaper anyway. I don't know if it's as cheap as the other pills. You'd have to check with that, but that it is generic, so that is an option. Another thing to think about with liquids is you can prescribe like a lot of intermediate doses, right? So it's 5 milligrams per 5 milliliters, right? So essentially every milliliter is a milligram. And so if you wanted to give somebody 22 milligrams, you could have them measure out 22 milliliters. And so that would be an advantage of a liquid product, is if you're trying to do fine titrations for whatever reason that's necessary, it would be easier to do with a liquid product. I had a patient once that was very, very, what's the word for it? I'm forgetting. Uh, v- Very tuned in on her dose of her stimulant, and she would actually split her pills into like tenths of a size, and she would basically like change her doses by these very small margins depending on the day and the activity. And she was a student, just very detailed, um, rigid with, and just like, I know I need like this many tenths for this days and this many tenths of a pill for this day, and would split them. And so, if you got a patient like that, hey, the liquid might be easier. So she's not, and she would like weigh it out. And it was freaking interesting. So Zenzedi is basically just a tablet version of Procentra, where Procentra is the liquid. Everything else is exactly the same. And it's also generic as well. So the only difference is one's a liquid, one's a tablet. Um, you know, pick whichever one you prefer. And Zenzedi is essentially like exactly the same as Dexedrine. Like it is Dexedrine. Like Dexedrine was the branded product that's no longer there, and the generic version of that branded product is also not available. But the generic version of um, this Zenzedi is available, which is the exact same thing as the generic version of of Dexedrine. Okay, so that's kind of an interesting uh, history there, so that you can kind of understand the differences between all these amphetamine products. All right, so let's look at the last dextroamphetamine product, Xelstrym. All right, this is the transdermal. All right, this is a pretty new product, came out in 2022. It is not generic, and it will not be until 2033. So that's like 8 more years. That's a really long time. Um, so I would probably be like more cautious with this one, just because it's expensive. It's a little bit different in the way that you dose it, because it's a patch. So for those 6 to 17 years old, so this can be used in 6 and up. And remember, this is the one dextroamphetamine product that is FDA approved for adults. Could you get away with giving an adult a generic version of dextroamphetamine? Um, yeah, probably. Is it FDA approved for it? No. Would the insurance pay for it? If it's really cheap, probably. So there's that. But this is the one dextroamphetamine product that is FDA approved for adults. So that's important to know. The dose for those 6 to 17 is in the range of 4.5 milligrams in the morning to 18 milligrams in the morning. And for adults, they start with 9, and the max dose is also 18. So the dose equivalent of 9 milligrams is 10 milligrams of mixed amphetamine salts. That means that max dose of 18 is only equivalent to 20 milligrams of mixed amphetamine salts, which is half half to like even a third of the max dose of that. And so you can't really give somebody as much of this one. So you're really maxing out at like equivalent of 20 of Adderall XR, right? The 18 milligrams. So basically 9 is equivalent to 10, just because of the way it's formulated in the patch. And also you have to know that like you apply the patch for 9 hours. There's a 2-hour delay in onset. So unlike that 20 to 60-minute delay, the patch has a lot longer. Now, a lot of you may be familiar with Daytrana, which is the patch for methylphenidate, which came out much earlier. This is the newest product that we have. Actually, I think Qelbree may have come out. I feel like Qelbree may have come out the same year, 2022. Maybe it was 2023, but I think it was around then. But it's not a stimulant. So this Qelbree and Xelstrym are the two newest products. All right. So you apply the patch for 9 hours. It does have a 2-hour delay, which is a lot longer than your other products, because it takes longer to get through the skin into the system. You can put it on the upper chest, the deltoid, the upper back, the flank, which is like the lower back, I guess, or butt. I don't know. Flank, is that butt? Hip. So what is hip like? Is that like side of your butt? I don't know. They don't want to say the word butt. So the formulation, also this is extended release. So it's a patch XR. So it's extended release. That makes sense because it does last, right? takes 120 minutes onset, time to peak 6 to 9 hours, and the duration of action is 9 to 12 hours. So it's a bit longer. And when we compare it to the Dexedrine Spansels, its duration is around 8 hours. So this is our longest acting of the dextroamphetamine products. Can you split it? No. Would you need to? No, you're not swallowing it. It's available in 4.5s, 9s, 18s, and I don't know, maybe 12s as well. So you don't need to split this product. And if you split it, it messes up how it like comes out and gets absorbed and stuff. So don't do that. And then anytime you're using a patch, you have to worry about like, if heat's applied to it, if it gets hot, if there's like a heating pad on it, that can cause things to come out faster. If you're getting it wet, I think usually that's okay, but if it's a hot tub, like the heat can be a problem. Also, with any patch, you have to kind of be cognizant that patients might have a skin reaction to it. So we have another patch also, Daytrana, but also another thing to kind of be aware of is that some patients have a reaction to the adhesive. They might have an allergy to the adhesive, or they may have a skin sensitivity to just having the medication absorbed in that way. So that's another thing you have to be cognizant of anytime you have a patch delivery system. And so there's issues with using patches. Um, you may be wondering, what's the benefit? Why don't I just like take the pill and or something like that? Um, they tend to be smoother. So I've got a comparison here between Lisdexamphetamine, which is Vyvanse, and Xelstrym, and they both and Xelstrym has an even smoother curve. And this is something that patients complain about, having these peaks where it kind of jumps up and jumps down. One reason they like Vyvanse is because it's probably about the smoothest product we have. But Xelstrym is even smoother. And so if you look at this, like lisdexamphetamine peaks pretty high, pretty fast, and then slowly tapers off, whereas Xelstrym comes on really slowly, has a slow peak, and then it tapers off about the same as lisdexamphetamine. And so it is smoother, but it doesn't get to the higher concentration. So I would say a downside of Xelstrym is that we can't dose it as high if we need to dose it higher. Um, I'd say most people don't need more than equivalence of 20 milligrams of Adderall XR. So I would say that this is probably an adequate dose for most people, but if it's not, we can't really up it. You'd have to change to a different product. And so I think the benefit here is the smoothness and I mean, it's the smoothness, right? And another thing with these patches, and I've heard this, I'm not aware about Xelstrym, but with Daytrana, I know that you're supposed to take it off after like 9 hours or whatever, right? There's actually still drug left in there. You could technically probably leave it on, but then and it would last longer. So if you need a longer duration of action, and the other cool thing is like if you don't want it to last as long, you could take it off sooner. Now you wouldn't be following the instructions on the package, which is like put it on for 9 hours and that's it. You can take it off sooner. You can leave it on longer. And so there's still drug left in there. Like my knowledge is more on Daytrana, like I said. But you do have some of that, um, some of that flexibility in there. And like this is also a way that like parents might sneak it onto a kid where they just like kind of slap it on their back and the kid doesn't even know the patch is on. So it may be easier to get the medication into a kid with a patch. I find it interesting that like the patch is the only dexamphetamine product that is approved for adults, when adults probably wouldn't need a patch. But like I think that smoothness of the onset and just this like the taper on the titrate on the taper off of the drug could be a benefit. Um, and then the ability to kind of take that patch off earlier and later and like play with that could be beneficial. Those are some benefits I'd say to Zellstrom, but then I'd say that, you know, the dosing limitations would be a downside. And the big downside for me is going to be that price. This is not generic for 8 more years. You know, this is like a last resort kind of product for me. Like if I've given them everything else and we found out, amphetamine is like works better than methylphenidate, and maybe dextro is better for them, and they're just having problems with these like the drug smoothness, and I've tried other things, this may be the best option for those patients. So would I use Xelstrym? I can imagine a situation where I would. Have I used it? No, I have not. Um, can I imagine that there would be very many people that I would give this to? It would be very few. All right. So those are the dextroamphetamine products. Um, I'm going to go ahead and get into the mixed amphetamine salts. This may end up taking so long that I actually like create a separate episode from this. So let's talk about mixed amphetamine salts. They are FDA approved in adults and children for both ADHD and narcolepsy, and they contain the same black box warning that we discussed before: abuse, misuse, and addiction. And also overdose is kind of in there, but that's not in the title. Our main product of mixed amphetamine salts is Adderall. This was FDA approved for ADHD in 1996. It can be dosed in those 3 and up, so it's one of the ones that can go down as low as 3. 3 to 5, the dosing is 2.5 in the morning to a max of 20 milligrams twice a day. And remember, this is the immediate release Adderall. That's why we call it Adderall. I would sometimes call it Adderall IR, even though that's not its official name, just to kind of delineate it from Adderall XR, to relieve some of the confusion. For those 6 and up, the dose is 5 milligrams in the morning to 30 twice a day. And this max dose has kind of confused me with Adderall. I swear there used to be a max of 40 milligrams for ADHD and 60 for narcolepsy. And then it's like I went and checked, and like this was gone. This 40 was gone. And it just said kind of like, yeah, well, there's no evidence it really works more than 40, but the max dose is 60. And so I was like, okay, so the max dose is 60 now, but like still don't go above 40 probably. But before it was more like a hard 40. I don't know, maybe I'm remembering wrong, but I could swear that that's what it was. All right, so um, the amphetamines are more potent than the methylphenidates. So 10 milligrams of this is equivalent to 20 milligrams of methylphenidate. This is a capsule, 20 to 60 minutes onset of action, 3 hours time to peak, 48 hours, 4 to 8 hours duration, all the same. Can you split it? Yes, it's an IR product. You can crush it, chew it, whatever. Age 3 and up. And this is the difference with our mixed amphetamine salt products. It is a 3-to-1 racemic mixture of dextro to levo amphetamine. Okay, so we've got 4 salts. If you've ever seen this, it's called mixed amphetamine salts, but in like the pharmacy system, it's listed as all 4 of these products with like a plus sign in between. So you've got dextroamphetamine sulfate, which that's Dexedrine, right? So we remember dextroamphetamine sulfate, but we also have dextroamphetamine saccharate. I don't know why it matters. What does this saccharate versus sulfate do? I have no idea. Most of these amphetamine products are sulfates. I'm not sure what having some 25% of the product having a saccharate in there. To me, these are the inert substances that just like kind of dissolve in water and don't actually do anything. And then there's a racemic mixture of dextro to levo amphetamine sulfate, so a mixed dextro levo amphetamine sulfate is kind of like a amphetamine base. And then you've got a dextro levo amphetamine aspartate monohydrate in there as well. And when you kind of do all the math of like, we got 50% dextro, and then we've got 50% that's like half dextro, half levo, that turns out to be 75% dextro, 25% levo. So this product is less potent than our dextroamphetamines. It's got some levo in there. So it may have a very minor difference in how it works because of that. because our dextrose didn't have, our dextroamphetamine products didn't have any levo in them. And remember, I talked about at the beginning of the episode, the levo actually does have some effect. And so the mixture of that can make a difference. Is this generic? Absolutely it is. All right. Let's talk about the next product, mixed amphetamine salts ER, otherwise known as Adderall XR, which came out in 2001. So this one dosed 10 to 40, but apparently we can go up to 60. I usually don't. I will typically start an adult on 20. If it was a kid, I'd probably go with 10. Um, I have started adults on 10. If I thought they might be sensitive based on other responses to medications, I might give them 10s and say, hey, you can go up to 2 of these before you see me if that 10's not doing anything for you. The great thing about these meds, they work immediately. They will work day one. Will they work the same day one as they work day 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7? No. Typically, they will hit harder when you first start taking them, and then they will mellow out after a few days. So unlike our antidepressants, which like don't work at all in the beginning and then they begin to slowly work, these actually hit kind of harder. So if it feels too strong, it may not feel strong a few days later. And then if you take it for a long time, you may actually notice that the effect goes down. And that's why I say, maybe you want to take a drug holiday. I know that's controversial, but I say it. And you may get some of that effect back. Okay. So typically I'll start folks on adults on 20, maybe 10, and then they can go up to 20 on their own and see how they think. That works for most patients. And then if it's not enough for people, I might go up to 30. I might go up to 40. I've never had anyone on 60, honestly. I've had patients that have had a history of being on 60. I have never personally had a patient on 60. I don't like the idea of having a patient on 60. I like to say, let's make 40 work for you. If I treated a truckload of these patients, I'm sure I'd find some people that I would be okay going up to 60 on. It's just not something that in my patient population I've ever really had to do. All right. So same dose equivalents as our IR product, same capsule, same onset of action. Time to peak is later because this is an XR product, 7 hours. Duration of action is longer, 8 to 12, because this is one of our longest acting products we've talked about. Was that about the same as Spancels? No, those were only 8, and then we had Xelstrym, which was 9 to 12. So it's similar to that at 8 to 12. All right. Can you split it? Do not crush or chew it, but sprinkling is okay. Okay, so you can open up the capsule and dump out the little beads. This product is only 6 and up. Typically, the products that can be used for 3 and up are going to be your shorter acting products, and you're going to want to use your shorter acting products in your younger kids anyway. Even like your 6-year-olds, I'm probably start with a shorter acting product. A lot of the time, these longer acting products are too long acting for your younger kids. So I like to start with a shorter acting and then see if we need to add something later in the day. And we might even add a lower dose. We might do a 10 in the morning, a 5 in the afternoon. We don't necessarily have to do 10 and 10. Or say you got a smaller kid, you're starting with 2.5. There's charts based on age or based on weight on the schedule. And typically when these drugs are titrated, we're going up 1 week at a time. And so with a kid, you may start with 25, right? That's it, just 25 twice a day, or and then say go up to 5, and you may have them on 5 and then a 2.5 instead of a 5 and a 5. Okay. With an XR product, of course, that's only dosed once a day. But if we have a smaller kid and we need to use the IR product, and maybe we do need to dose it twice a day, we don't necessarily have to dose that second dose the same. You have so much flexibility with these meds. It's another reason I love them. They're fun to prescribe because you can really dial it in. You can make, when they take it, which formulation they take it, what is it, liquid, is it patch, is it XR, is it short acting, is it medium acting, is it super long acting? Do you take it at 7 in the morning or 8, or do you take an extra dose in the afternoon on this day versus this day? So many things you can do to play around with these meds. You just gotta, and the thing is, I'm teaching you how they work. And so when you know how they work and then you see how the drug you gave the patient worked, you can then manipulate it in such a way, mixing XR with IRs. You can manipulate it in all these different ways to try and get the effect that you're looking for, which is cool. I think it's cool. I think it's super awesome. All right. So um, this is an XR, so older kids, 6 and up. It's got the same 3-to-1 racemic mixture of the 4 different salts. And this one, kind of like the Spancels, it's a 50% IR beads and a 50% delayed release beads. Is it generic? Heck yeah, it is. All right. So that means that the capsule contains 2 different beads. The immediate release pellet, there's a bead in the center, and then there is a drug on top of that bead, and then there's a overcoating on that drug, so we can get it in, get it in there, but we don't want it dissolving in the mouth necessarily. Maybe it's okay. So we have products that dissolve in the mouth. We'll talk about that, but we get it in there. It gets released pretty soon. Now, the other 50% of the beads are basically an immediate release bead, and then on top of that coating of that overcoating, you've got a functional polymer, and then another overcoating on that. And so it's actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers thick. And there's ones that are even more than this. This is another thing. The technology of how they get these like different releasing things are super cool. So anyway, that functional polymer takes longer to get eaten through in your digestive system. And so what happens is these immediate release pellets, they get released, shortly after you take it. And the delayed ones, it takes time for your body to eat through it. That way you don't have to take the second IR dose. It's essentially like your body gives you the second IR dose, and it's smoother, right? So in this next chart, I've got a comparison of Adderall IR given twice a day versus, which is not IR, it's Adderall, versus Adderall XR given once a day. And what you can see is there's kind of the 2 peaks with the immediate release product where you have a smoother curve. And so like this is an advantage. If you need the longer acting product, then having this smoother curve is very desirable, because those peaks can feel like too strong. And so like side effects like jitteriness or whatever kind of side effect they might be getting, it gets too intense during those peaks. And then it drops off and they're like, oh, I'm not getting enough drug. I'm not feeling the effect. And then boom, the second part kicks in, right? When you take the drug again, the second IR dose. But with the XR product, that transition between the 2 doses isn't like peak and drop, peak and drop. It's like smoother, right? And so that's another big reason why these are preferred. And then we've got one more mixed amphetamine salt. Yeah, I'm totally going to finish this today. There were only 3 mixed amphetamine salt products to talk about. This last one is actually called mixed amphetamine salts 3-bead ER. Its brand name is Mydayis. It came out in 2017. There's some differences between this one and the Adderall XR. This is a little bit like giving an XR and then an IR later in the day, which is what I do. I don't give Mydayis because Mydayis is not generic until 2029. If this product gets cheaper in 4 years, maybe I'll prescribe this guy. But like for now, I don't really, if there's a patient that does the XRIR and they're really just having a hard time with it, I would consider using this product. But like I always try and save the healthcare system money, like unless it's going to really impede patient care and it's just like they need this product, but like vast majority of people don't. Okay. And when they're taking that, either third IR dose or that IR dose after an XR dose, it's after they've gotten out of school and stuff anyway. Usually it's like after that. So it's not interrupting their school. This is like, this product is really long acting, 16 hours. It's like the longest acting product that we have of any kind of stimulant. 16 hours, super long. There's another one that's, I think, about the same that we'll get to. I think it's a methylphenidate product, but very long duration of action, because you've got that 8 to 12 of like the XR plus another 4 to 6 of the IR on there. So it adds up to like 16 hours. The dosing equivalent is the same. 10 milligrams of this equates to 20 milligrams of methylphenidate. But there is one difference here, and that's the max dose, where I said that like kind of a soft max was 40 on Adderall and Adderall XR, and a hard kind of max of 60. This one maxes out at 50. So for adults, it's 12.5 to 50. And for those under 18, they've actually specified 25. And I actually find this kind of interesting, because think about it. Say you're taking, say you're taking 20 milligrams of Adderall XR, and then we need to add a 10 milligram to get us through to the end of the day. That's 30, right? But say we gave 40 of Adderall XR and it didn't last long enough, and we needed to add an extra 10 or a 20. We'd have up to 60 there. We'd have up to 50, 60 there if we're like using that max dose of XR with an IR. But with the Mydayis, it's only 50 we can get to. Okay. And for kids, kids, that includes 17-year-olds. I mean, these are basically, adult sized people. The max dose is only 25. So like that would be like giving like a 20 XR with a 5 IR. So that's another reason why Mydayis may not be, preferred, because its max dose is lower, and you can't adjust that, right? Because this is just one pill. So you have less flexibility here. With your Adderall XR IR combo, you can kind of like, you could do 20 and a 10 or 20 and a 5 or 30 and a 10 or whatever. You've got that flexibility. If you need to up that IR dose, you can up that IR dose. But with Mydayis, it's just one pill. So, you're maxing out at 25 for kids and 50 for adults. I think that's probably enough. But for the patient that it's not enough for, you are a little bit restrained there. Okay. Same onset of action, 20 to 60 minutes, time to peak about the same, 7 to 10 hours, maybe a little bit later. The duration of action, as I said, longer at 16. It actually says less than or equal to 16 hours officially. Can you split it? Yes. All these long-acting products you can. Methylphenidate's different. A lot of the long-acting methylphenidate products you cannot. But that's an advantage of the amphetamine products, is you can most if not all of these you can sprinkle. Of course, the patch you can't, but you would need to. Another restriction on Mydayis is it can only be used in those 13 and up. So in that max dose of 25, that's for 13 to 18. Okay. So because this is longer acting, kind of like how I said, for those that are 3 to 5, we can only use the IR. And then for 6 and up, when you can use the XR, well, for this is like the triple acting, we have to wait till 13 before this is allowed. And we probably don't need it until then, to be perfectly honest. Maybe we don't even need it for 13. So what is this made out of, right? Why is this so long acting? And it's kind of neat. It's neater than you would think. So it's got the same 3:1 racemic mixture as Adderall does. The same mixed amphetamine salts, 3:1 of Dexter and Levo. But the capsule contains 1/3 IR beads, 1/3 of the beads release. They release the core at a pH of 5.5 in the proximal small intestine. And then you've got another third that release a porous core continuously, and other core at pH of 7.0 in the distal intestine. So that third actually releases two things. And that's what gives it, this is what gives it its long mechanism, or its long duration of action, and its very smooth action. And remember, generic at 2029, not there yet. I've got a little drawing of it here, and you can kind of see the three different, the IR, which is just like a core with the drug on it. But the difference between the medium releasing third of the beads and the late releasing don't have like an extra layer on there. It's not like you have to eat through 2 layers. It's just a different type of release. So remember that medium acting one releases at a pH of 5.5, which we have in the proximal intestine. Because remember, the pH in the stomach is really low. It's really acidic. What is it like? Sorry, I'm not a GI doc. Was it like 2.0? I don't know, I'm just guessing. I think that's around what it is. So pH is really low in the stomach. And so then the pH rises as we exit the stomach. And then once the pH gets up to 5.5, that triggers the release of this second third of the beads in the proximal intestine. As we move further down to the distal intestine, that pH is going to rise further to 7.0 in the distal intestine. And that's the pH that's going to trigger the release of the next third. So like, it's a complicated pill. So I can understand why they'd want to charge some money for this. And then I've got a little comparison chart here comparing Mydayis 37.5 milligrams compared to a mixed amphetamine salt ER 25 milligrams plus an IR of 12.5 given later. And what you can see is we've got that smooth curve with the 25 ER, and then we've got like a drop and then a jump with the IR. So kind of like the same way that like the ER or the XR Adderall is smoother than 2 IRs, this Mydayis is smoother than doing an XR plus an IR. So I would definitely say this would be preferable if it were like the same price, but like, is it really worth it if it's not? If someone's really not tolerating adding that IR dose later, and I've actually never seen that. In fact, sometimes I will use the IR, and I'll talk about this later, but like sometimes I will use the IR to smooth out that crash, right? So people will get like a rebound that of irritability and anxiety and symptoms when this drug is wearing off, and sometimes adding a small IR at the end. So sometimes I'm not adding that IR because I need the drug to last longer. Sometimes I'm using that IR to smooth out that ending. And in that case, say, where we're using 20, in here they use 25 plus a 12.5, but say, an easier way would just be like, say we're using a 20 plus a 10. Well, maybe I don't add a 10 of IR at the end because I'm not trying to extend the life. I just do a 2.5 or a 5. I'm just trying to like mellow out that trailing off of the drug. Okay, so that's another way that I might use the IR. Not because I need it longer acting, but because I'm trying to like handle that that drop, that sudden drop in drug that causes these rebound symptoms. Okay, and with the Mydayis, you're gonna have a smoother action there. Okay, and you're not gonna have as much rebound. So I think this is probably a pretty nice product if you need the longer mechanism of action. And a lot of people do. Like, to be honest with you, when I give the XR, a lot of people tell me that it's like wearing off around 1 or 2, and they're at work until 4. I mean, it's not acting 8 hours or 8 to 12 hours. It's only acting 6, 7 hours for them. These are adults. These are not kids. It's not acting as long. And so that these are folks I add an IR for, or I say, just take it later. Sometimes I'll just be like, just take it later. Do you need it really? Do you need it first thing in the morning? How about we have it kick in at like 9 instead of 7, and then we can get a little bit more life. It's like they need more in the afternoon because I'm trying not to give them too much drug. I'm trying not to give them too, IRs as well. And I think that's the beauty of Mydayis, is that like for an adult, it will last the amount of time that they need. It's just, I want to wait till it's generic before I like prescribe this en masse. In fact, it's not even available to me overseas. But that is a consideration. And I do think this is probably an amazing product, especially for an adult. And then you get folks who like maybe they have to they work, but they're doing classes, right? They've got class. They're trying to go through college while they're working, and I see that in the military a lot. And then they need drug after they come home from work, and their XR is completely worn off. And so adding some IR for those folks can be beneficial. And so some Mydayis might actually help with those folks as well. Okay, so this is a product that I have never prescribed. I actually had a patient who was getting it from a civilian, non-military provider. I saw it in their chart that they were seeing for something else. That I think I saw them on inpatient, so like they weren't my patient. but they were seeing somebody, and I was reading their chart, and I was like, oh, you're on Mydayis, interesting. And I don't know, when I first found out about Mydayis, I like try to guess like why did they come up with this name? Like, my day is fill in the blank. Like, my day is great. My day is amazing. Um, like you decide how your day is. My day is XYZ. I have no idea. Like, Mydayis, what a weird name. Um, my my day is good. I don't know. Maybe that's too long. So they shortened it to Mydayis. I don't know. If somebody finds that out, let me know. But yeah, that brings us through our second group of amphetamines, and I will talk about lisdexamphetamine and amphetamine base next time. So you won't want to miss that. And let's see. Let me just quickly tell you what the song of the day is and why I've chosen it. What are we going with today? Um, Born Frustrated by Rancid. Have I used any Rancid songs? I don't know if I've used any Rancid songs. They're a pretty well known group, and I love Rancid. Amazing, amazing musicians. I thought Born Frustrated. That sounds like someone who has ADHD that's untreated. They're frustrated, they were born frustrated. They don't know, and they get some ADHD meds, and they're doing better. All right, so hope you enjoyed the show, and I hope you'll come back next time. I'll see you then.